There we go. Welcome, everybody, to the Richard Newton Distinguished Innovator Lecture Series, a Berkeley Changemaker course. And tonight, we're thrilled to have Kelly Palmer joining us from Denver, Colorado, by the magic of Zoom. And Rishi, I think you're in your room in Chicago. Katya, you're going to be introducing. Where are you?
I'm in the Bay Area, like an hour away from Berkeley at home, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And Pranati, where are you? In a room with good art. And Swetha, where are you?
I am on campus in Berkeley.
Fantastic. I, for once, don't have the books in my background. Maybe you can see I'm in up on the coast a bit in Northern California. So who knows, Katya? Maybe I'm close to you. I'm in Mendocino County.
Oh, yeah, I'm south of San Francisco. So
oh, never mind. We are getting close to our 200 number. I want to get a little bit closer to that, and then we'll go ahead and officially start because I have some insight into what Kelly's going to talk about today, and she is chock full of information. I don't know if anybody is like me, and you don't have to be, but if I don't write it down physically, sometimes I don't remember it. So while everybody will have obviously a recording, because I've seen a lot of these slides and heard Kelly speak, she has lots of tidbits and nuggets. So if you can, get out your Moleskine or your notebook or whatever you write in. We're getting closer, and I don't want to take any more of your time. It is my pleasure to introduce Katya Pachenko. Katya took the challenge at the beginning of the year to introduce a speaker, and she chose to introduce Kelly in particular. Katya has a pretty interesting background. Maybe she'll touch on that when she does her introduction. But I was extremely struck by something that she's doing that not everybody does, and that is being focused on dance. Katya, welcome.
yeah, hi. I think at the beginning of the Changemaker course, I was more interested in presenting Kelly Palmer because she has this human-centered approach to what she does. Kind of to give an overview, today more than ever, it's up to businesses to make sure that they create cultures of continuous learning in which employees are always engaged in developing new skills. To build the workforce of the future, businesses need to be evolving constantly. They need to focus on the workforce agility with employees engaged in learning new skills at all time. Far too much workplace learning still takes place through the outdated system of classroom instruction and lectures. This is an excerpt I actually stole from Kelly Palmer's article in the Scientific American, Businesses Need to Embrace the New Science of Learning. And it's a major focus of Kelly's work. A quick overview of how Kelly got to working in the field she is now. After graduating from the San Jose State University, on track to becoming a teacher with a bachelor's degree in English and communications, her passion for technology led her to become the manager of product and information design at Sun Microsystems. At Sun, in addition to contributing to the Java Help project, she focused her career on product development and user experience design. When she became a senior director of Sun's learning organization, she simultaneously earned a master's degree in instructional and performance technology with an emphasis on learning technology. She later became vice president of learning at Yahoo, where she led a learning function focused on innovative and future-focused skills, project-based engineering and product designer boot camps. She was then the CLO at LinkedIn, where she started a learning talent organization from the ground up, assembling one of the most innovative learning and talent teams in the industry. She then, in 2018, wrote and published a book called The Expertise Economy, where she discusses the latest findings from science of learning and motivation. And she continues to use a human-centered approach in advising companies and leaders on how they can reskill their workforce and create strategies that leverage technology and drive a culture of continuous learning. If that wasn't enough, she is currently the Chief Learning and Talent Officer at Degreed, an online service for identifying skill gaps, as well as how to track and pick them up. And today is actually a big day for the startup. It was announced that Degreed is now valued at over 1 billion. So without further ado, I would like to congratulate and welcome Kelly Palmer.
Katya, thank you so much. What a fantastic introduction. And I think it's, as we talk today, you'll see that, most careers don't actually go in the exact path that you think they will go. And so we're going to talk a bit about that today. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides and do this. I'll play from start. And it's such a pleasure and honor to be here today to talk to you all at Berkeley. I'm a huge Bear fan. I've been to Cal so many times for football and basketball games over the last 25 years. It's a different story, but I'm very familiar with the Berkeley campus. And today, so I'm showing the copy of the book that I co-authored about a year and a half ago called The Expertise Economy, because upskilling the workforce is probably the most urgent issue of our time. So as Katya, explained, I've worked at a lot of companies in Silicon Valley. I've spent my whole career in Silicon Valley, and I lived in the Bay Area for most of my life. I only recently relocated to Denver, Colorado just a few months ago, partly because of the pandemic and that most people can work anywhere they want to now. But just to give you an idea of how, as I go through my career journey, it wasn't always completely planned out. And I'm sure students that I talk to all the time and new college grads don't often even know, they know what they studied, but they're not really sure what that means for how they're going to pursue their careers. And that was the same for me as well. I was an English major in undergrad, along with communications. And I did think that maybe I wanted to teach at the university, English at the university level, but it was the early days of technology, and I got an amazing opportunity to start working for technology companies when they weren't even sure all the roles and skills that people needed. And so I did then what I advocate everyone doing now, which is continuous learning. I learned how to code myself. I got into a management role at Sun Microsystems and kind of worked my way up the leadership chain. I took opportunities as they came to me. So I was in product development. I moved into corporate strategy. And then about mid-career, I actually took a step back and I said, is this really what I want to be doing for the rest of my career? I'd had a very successful career at Sun Microsystems, but I really wanted to do something that I was passionate about and that I really felt like where I would have a huge impact, in my life and in the world, in the industry. So I completely changed careers. I went back, I was fortunate enough to get an executive position in our learning organization at Sun, and at the same time went back to school and got my master's in education technology, learning, adult learning theory, and learning science. And so that's where my career has been the last 15 years. And I won't go through every piece that Katya kind of already mentioned, but I think that the important points is really around innovation. Even when I got to Sun and I went into the learning field, I was pretty shocked that in Silicon Valley that learning was so antiquated in the some of the most technology-driven companies in Silicon Valley. So even at Sun, in the 4 years I was there, we were really focused on this intersection of technology and education and how we could help people continuously learn to build skills and learn throughout the entirety of their careers. So that started at Sun, continued on with that innovation at Yahoo, and then got this great opportunity to join LinkedIn to start their learning organization from the ground up. And in that, I think the other thing that was key in this career journey is I actually got to take a lot of the skills that I learned in all my other roles, bring them together. And I hired a small development team to build a learning platform at LinkedIn, very much the first learning experience platform. That led me to Degreed, where I'm at today. And it's a really big day at Degreed. I have to say, I've been at Degreed for 5 years, and we are learning to help, we provide learning to help people build skills, but then also use AI and machine learning to help people match those skills to opportunities. So as you get into the workforce, you're going to see how valuable that actually is. And so for Degreed today, we just ended our Series D round of funding, and we were valued at $1.4 billion, which is pretty cool. And we're on our way. We are really changing the way corporations and companies think about learning for the future. So with that, I'll kind of move forward. As I mentioned, that most career paths are non-standard. I didn't end up, where I started is not where I thought I would end up. So I just kind of went through that story, but really my career path is not that unique, in that most people I talk to say that they're not doing what they thought that they would be doing when they were in school or even early in their careers. Opportunities come up, things change. So let's talk a little bit about how work and jobs are fundamentally changing. I mean, I think that there's never been a more exciting time in the world of work. We know that things are dramatically different than they were even just 5 years ago. People are living and working longer, so the length of a career is a lot longer. The average tenure in a job is 4.5 years. However, in Silicon Valley, that is actually a lot lower. And when I was at LinkedIn, we had 70% millennials, and the average for that group is about 2 years. And then also the half-life of a learned skill. I mean, this may or may not be good news to most of you who are in school, but on average, 5 years is how long it takes for a skill that you're learning to become outdated. And if you're in technology, that's more like 2 years, and sometimes even less. And so that does bring us to the point where we have to realize that, going to school and thinking that what you're learning in university is going to take you through the entirety of your career just isn't a reality anymore. We need to be continuously learning. The other thing that's really changing is that we're really moving away from people doing routine tasks and for companies to focus on efficiency. And really, I think this is great news that companies are hoping that humans are going to create more value in the future of work. And so I think that that's exciting. And as we talk about in the book, The Expertise Economy, if skills are the currency in the future of work, how do we think about work and skills differently than we have in the past? Typically how it works, and it does still work this way in a lot of places, but it's quickly changing. The way you get a job in the world is it depends on where you went to school and where you worked, right? Those are the things that are on your LinkedIn profile or your resume, and that's what helps you, along with your connections, get a job. But more and more, it's becoming clear that things are moving much too fast, and that skills are going to be the thing that helps you as you get jobs, as you progress in your career. And we see the whole industry, the whole world changing to a skills-based economy. So I love this. I love this graphic. This was something that was in the Wall Street Journal about a year and a half ago, and it's something that Degreed is focused on. It's this idea that you can actually use technology, AI, and machine learning to help you figure out where your career path is going to go. It's like the GPS for your career. So if you have this set of skills, here's all the different opportunities that you have in your company to do things. And this is how much money you would make. And these are your possibilities. And so this is a new way of thinking about looking at careers in work. And a lot of tech companies are focused on this right now because it's the way of the future. We're calling this an internal career marketplace, this idea that you can link learning to skills, then skills to opportunities for your career. So it's a pretty cool model, I think. And I also work quite a bit with both McKinsey and Deloitte. Deloitte has this great Center for the Edge where they think about the future of work. And this is where this idea that humans, the future of work is about humans and what humans can do versus what machines can do. And that's how we're going to differentiate things and how we're going to work together. So I think this idea that, and Katya mentioned it in my introduction, we're really focused on human-centered future of work rather than kind of efficiencies and processes and things, and getting more out of people. We want to be able to create more value. So I've created some poll questions. I'm hoping Victoria is going to help me out with this. And so the first, I want to get you involved in this discussion. So the first poll question I have is, how many jobs do you expect to have in your career? And so you can pick choices 1 through 4. Do you think you'll have 1 to 3 different jobs in your career, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, or more than 10 different jobs in your career? And this doesn't mean different companies. It could be different jobs in the same company, but just would love to get your a sense of your thoughts about how many jobs you might have in the entirety of your career.
Kelly, can you see what it's looking like? It's almost a match and match between 3 to 5 or 5 to 10.
Oh, it didn't pull up for me for some reason.
Let me end the poll and share results.
Oh, there we go. Got it. Okay, so yeah, so a lot of people think that they'll have about 3 to 5 jobs. Some people think 5 to 10. 14% said more than 10. So I find that interesting because what the statistics are saying these days is that most people will have at least 10 to 15 roles in their career. So I think, and the other thing that's really interesting about that is that we can see that through data of how often people change jobs. And I know from personal experience and from my son who graduated a few years ago, he and his friends are already on their second jobs, even 3 years out of college, 3 to 4 years out of college. So they're right on track to be changing their job every 2 years or so. And it used to be in my when I started out that it didn't look good on a resume if you change jobs too much. But now actually almost the opposite is true. It's like if you're at a company for a long time, people wonder, wow, why have you been there so long? So it's actually can be a detriment rather than an advantage if you haven't moved around. It's like people want to see that you're continuously learning and growing in your career. Okay, so the other thing, so why is it that people are changing jobs so often, or they want to have new experiences? And there's something called the S curve. And I love this model because what it talks about is how you feel when you first start a job and what happens as you progress in that job. And so when you first start out in a job, you're a little nervous, you're not sure if you can actually do everything that the job is requiring you to do. And then you start to feel more comfortable as you're in the job, you're gaining more skills, you're gaining more confidence, and you get up to a level to where you're actually feeling, pretty good. And you can see that's the confidence level here in the middle. But then what happens is after you've been in a job for a while, and this is different for everyone, but when you get to the point where you're feeling a little I wouldn't say complacent, but like you can go to that job and it doesn't feel that challenging anymore, and you can do it pretty much without any stress. You're getting to the top of your S curve, and that's when you want people to think about either expanding their role in their job, like adding more opportunities to it, or completely changing jobs, so that you then go back through that S curve. And the whole idea is that you want to be continuously learning. You want to be having experiences that will help you grow and develop in your career, and that's how you can think about it. And you can always think about, where am I in the S curve in my role, and do I need to try something different? So next poll question: based on your major, do you think your first job will be, the first one, be directly related to your field of study? Two, be different than your field of study, or you're not sure yet? One of the reasons that I asked this is because I found it incredibly interesting that when I was at LinkedIn, I used to host new college grads coming into LinkedIn, and we had this thing called a business accelerator course for new college grads, and they would do a rotation through different functions within LinkedIn. And I'd always ask this question, like, what did you study? And then now you're in this particular program. And almost no one were doing this because they directly had that as their major in school. So I thought that was really interesting as well. So Victoria, do we have here's the poll results. Okay, so most of you, 51%, think that you're going to have your first job related directly to your field of study. About 30% different, and then about 21% not sure. I think that's probably typical, and a lot of people get into a job in their field of study as their first job, and then they realize how many different opportunities there are out there in the world. One of the things that I think is most challenging for people in college transitioning into the world of work is that it's not even clear how many different opportunities or roles there can be for you. And then you start to realize that as you get into the workforce. Okay, so a lot of times when I'm speaking, people will ask, okay, so one of the main questions people want to know is, what are the most important skills for the future? And I always say this, they're always changing. Future skills are hard to predict, but I can give you some ideas. So there's skills that are in high demand, and here's a few that are in very high demand. And I put them in two categories. The first category is what I'm calling power skills. And some of you may know this, but a lot of companies refer to these as soft skills, but I don't think that that's powerful enough. These are really important human skills. Human skills are another way people refer to these, but these are skills like communication, emotional intelligence, empathy, collaboration, resilience. We found that actually during the pandemic, that these skills, especially for leaders, were incredibly important, because and we could see leaders on full display whether or not they had some of these power skills. Now, that isn't to say that technical skills aren't really important too, but I think it's the combination of those two, and that a lot of people are going to school to gain those technical skills, so they have those. And so what's really important is that they also think about these power skills that are so important, and it's really the combination of the two that's the winning ticket for, I think, success in the world of work. So the technical skills, some of them that are very in demand right now, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cybersecurity is huge on this list. And I think regardless of what career you go into, data analytics, data science is huge. Like, there's no function now in the world of work that doesn't need data scientists. I mean, whether you're in HR, whether you're in finance, whether you're in engineering, any field, that's incredibly important. So one of the things that Degree does is that we actually are able to, based on the millions of users that we have across the globe, able to real time see what skills are trending by looking at the data. So one of the things I wanted to show you about this, and this is why education technology is such a hot area right now, especially for investors, is because this used to be done very manually, right? And then a lot of companies, it still is, like, they don't know what skills are the most important. But if you look at the data right after the pandemic hit, the top 10 skills, think of what they were: crisis management, resilience, mental health, empathy. Those were the things that were trending now. Now, if I were to pull this data today, it would be different than this. It's changing all the time. So the ability to get real-time data about what skills people are building and what skills they're learning, and what jobs are available, those are key data points for understanding the important skills of the future. This slide is slightly dated. It's a couple of years old, but I thought it would be helpful. Josh Burson is an industry analyst in the education HR technology field. And one of the things that he did was he did a study where he was asking how prepared are college grads to perform in the real world of work. And so he's asking employers, what they thought. So 35% of employers felt like new college grads were very well prepared. 34% said they were missing soft skills, or those power skills, human skills. But I think that the most important point here is that, and it's in the red bubble there, employers are 42% more worried about soft skills than technical skills. Because if you have that foundation of soft skills, that's what's going to distinguish you from another person who might have those same technical skills. And technical skills, they think are easier to teach, and they're also, the half-life of technical skills is shorter. So you have to keep learning those a lot faster. Interesting data. I always say that the most important skill, if you're thinking about what should I be thinking about, is learning agility. So what do I mean by learning agility? And that's the curiosity and the motivation to continuously learn throughout the entirety of your career. And again, I don't know if this is good news or bad news for people, but learning isn't going to stop once you've finished and gotten your degree. It's going to be something that is always part of what you do in the world of work. And the good news is that companies are going to make that easier for you. Next poll question I wanted to ask you is, can you map the skills that you are building now, while you're at school, to the skills required for jobs in the market? So the first answer is yes, I know what skills I have, and I can easily map those skills to jobs in the market. The second one, I'm not really certain that I can map the skills I have to jobs in the market. And the third one, it's kind of unclear how my major relates to actual job requirements in the market. So one of the reasons I'm asking this question is that a lot of new college grads will ask me to help them map their skills to the job requirements. And sometimes they don't even realize that they have so many more skills than maybe what their transcript shows or what their degree might indicate. So I think it's really important to be able to understand what skills, you might be taking a course that really focuses on critical thinking, but it's not something that's highlighted in the course title or something like that. So that's where you can really say, yes, I've got critical thinking skills, and I can map that to a job. So in terms of the results, about 53% of you feel like you can map the skills to jobs in the market. About 39 no, and then 9 are unsure. So I think I'm talking about this just because I think it's important. You can start thinking about it, as you're taking your classes, and think about what classes you're taking, what skills are you learning, and how can you start translating that to jobs in the market. So the challenge for companies right now, and one of the reasons that we wrote the expertise economy, is that once you're in a company, the challenge for most companies is that people's skills are getting outdated and they need new skills. So the challenge for companies, according to the World Economic Forum, is that we need to upskill 1 billion people by 2030. It's not a small task. So it's not just people coming into the workforce, it's people who are already in the workforce. And so that's one of the things, I've been focusing on with Degreed and with all the companies that I consult with and the venture funds that I advise as well. So you might have seen some of the headlines where we see a lot of companies investing in upskilling their workforce. I think it was Amazon who first talked about investing $700 million in upskilling their workforce, even reskilling people for jobs potentially outside of Amazon, which was really interesting. PwC is probably the biggest company that has invested the most that I've seen. They said that they were going to invest $3 billion in upskilling their workforce. And when you think about it, that makes sense for all the big consulting firms. I mean, their product is their talent and the skills that people bring to consult with other companies. And PwC does this amazing survey every year where they ask, ask CEOs around the world, what keeps you up at night? And the availability of key skills has been on that top 10 list for the last several years. So in 2018, it was number 5. In 2019, it popped up to number 3. In 2020, McKinsey or PwC actually did a whole study on companies that were performing advanced upskilling strategies in their companies versus those who weren't, and how much more successful those who focused on it were. So you have to ask, so why are CEOs so concerned about whether or not people have the right skills or not? Well, we know that companies can't be effective. They can't innovate effectively. They can't go after new market opportunities if the people in the company don't have the right skills to help them move into the future. So that's why they're so focused on that. Now I am going to ask you this poll question, but mostly because I'm going to show you what the industry is talking about. So you can talk about this in terms of if you have had internships or even if you don't, maybe your university, is your, do you feel like your organization is prepared to develop the skills that will be required by companies in the near future? So this might be a little tricky to ask this audience, but I more want to show what the result is from most companies in the industry. So would you say companies are unprepared, somewhat prepared, completely prepared, or you're not sure? And we'll wait for a second to see what the results are. Okay, so most of you thought that only 9% were unprepared and that 56% were somewhat prepared, 13% completely prepared, and 23% not sure. So you might be really surprised to see this, but this was the result. For Brandon Hall is another industry analyst that asked companies, how prepared are you to help your employees develop the skills that will be needed in the future? And 73, is that right? 73% said only somewhat prepared. And so not only 8% were completely prepared. And it's a struggle for companies right now. And again, why a lot of companies are now turning to technology to help them get their employees the skills they need for the future. The other thing that I think is important around this is that it used to be old business models were that companies would develop either managers, leaders, or high potential employees, and kind of the rest of the employees were left to fend for themselves. And what companies are realizing now that everybody needs to be skilled for the future, and that you can't just focus on a few of your employees, you have to focus on all of them. So in this new work model that is kind of being formed as we speak, really there's this idea that employers will help employees through technology, through other things, but really employees have to own their own personal development. They have to understand where they have skill gaps and how they're going to fill those skill gaps. But employers are making it much easier for employees to learn and grow inside the company, which is great, because in the past, employees felt like they had to move to a new company if they wanted to grow in their careers. And now what employers are realizing, companies know that they have to start helping people get new opportunities in their company. They don't want them to leave for new opportunities. So they're helping them match their skills to new projects and jobs in the company. And ultimately, that helps employees, stay engaged, find purpose, have impact in their work. And that's really what companies want for the employees that they have. And the other thing that we know is that managers play a huge role in helping people learn on the job. So we did a research degree with Harvard Business Publishing, asking, what employees, what are your biggest obstacles to job-related learning? And the highest answer there is that most people said, oh, I don't have the time, or I don't make the time to learn. And that's a huge issue in the world of work. And so one of the things that myself and a lot of others are doing are really advocating to not separate learning and work so much, make learning part of what work really is. And the other thing is, you just have to make time to learn as part of your job, or you won't stay competitive. But back to managers. So how can managers help? Managers can really help guide direction in learning, meaning, these are what the most important skills in our area are, and give employees guidance to say, hey, if you're really interested in staying in this field, for example, data science is going to be really important in this area, or, learning technology is really going to be important in this area. So giving that kind of guidance. I think the other thing is managers really recognizing and rewarding learning on the job. For the most part in work, what's recognized is what you deliver rather than what you're learning. And so we're encouraging managers to take a more active role in rewarding learning, because ultimately it helps on what people deliver. And I think just encouraging people to learn, modeling that, hey, I'm learning all the time too. I love this story from Microsoft's CEO, Satya Nadella. I was at Microsoft when he released his book called Hit Refresh. And what he talked about was completely changing the culture of Microsoft to a culture of learn-it-alls, not know-it-alls. So this idea that even a CEO still has things to learn, I think is incredibly valuable. And that gave his executives and his managers and his employees kind of permission to say, I don't know, and I'm still learning every day. So the main message, is if you aren't ready and willing to learn every day, and this is both for companies and for employees, you can't and won't stay competitive. So people have to continue learning all the time. So I'm going to give you from the book, we have a whole chapter on the book on how we learn best, where I did a lot of interviews with neuroscientists and learning scientists about, how we can become better learners. And so I'm going to give you 6 tips. First of all is make time for learning. I mean, I know you're in school now and you're probably making time for learning all the time. This is more for when you're on the job. You still need to make time for learning. It's about priorities and motivation. And there's a great book out there about motivation from a guy named Daniel Pink. I don't know how many are familiar with him, but he talks about motivation and what it takes for us to feel motivated to continue learning while we're in the workforce. And we all have this deeply human need to direct our own lives, to learn and create new things, and to really have an impact on the world. So he talks about autonomy, mastery, purpose. And I think it's, really motivation has to be built into learning at work. So think about what motivates you. The second tip I'm going to give you is around creating learning goals. So a lot of times, there's so many skills that people could be focusing on in the world of work. It's like, okay, to be really successful at this role, I have to be great at, these 15 skills. It's overwhelming to people. So I always say, create learning goals and just focus on one skill. So if when you think back about those power skills, it could be, I have a major in data science, but I should really make sure that I also have one of these power skills like communication or emotional intelligence. That could be a good example. And Carol Dweck, many of you may know about her. She's at Stanford and wrote a book called Mindset, but she talks a lot about this fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And we always encourage employees to have a growth mindset, believing, if you believe you can learn new things, you'll have a much easier time learning things than if you say, oh, I'm just not good at math and I can't learn that. So keep in mind your mindset. The third thing is, I think, really interesting because it's about whether or not you're trying to gain knowledge or build a skill. And we're talking a lot about this at Degreed right now because we do both, right? We help people get learning on demand when they need it while they're working, which is pretty much gaining knowledge. But if you want to build and that's really important, because if you're doing a job and you need to give a presentation and you want to get tips about how to give a great presentation, fantastic. You want to get some knowledge about that. But if you really want to build a skill, you've got to go through what we call the learning loop, which is basically get that knowledge, practice, get feedback, and reflect on that feedback. And so we talk about this in the book a bit, and maybe it's evident to a lot of people, but I know also that a lot of times we haven't learned how to learn even when we're at university. So this is a good distinction. The other person I interviewed for the book is a guy named Bror Saxberg, and he's actually at the Chan Zuckerberg Institute, and he talks about understanding great conditions for great learning. And this really helps you set up for success. So the first one is that, and I'm going to talk about old models of work. It used to be when you went to work, a lot of times they would say, everybody has to go to this training. And a lot of times it wasn't relevant. So if you don't feel like it's relevant to you, you won't really learn a lot. You have to see the value and the relevance in what you're learning. Second thing, we already talked about mindset. You have to believe you can master new skills. The third is, having conditions conducive to learning. Interestingly enough, just a stat on when the pandemic hit, we saw online learning increased by 500%. This wasn't just at Degreed, this is across the industry on the weekend. So people felt like they had some conditions conducive to learning all of a sudden, which was great. And then even on the weekdays, LinkedIn Learning saw a huge increase in online learning. So just think about that. Are you in a place where it's conducive to actually learn? And then lastly, you really have to have a positive emotional state to be learning. So those are the 4 conditions for great learning, which I always think are good tips. Number 5 is teaching others what you know. Peer-to-peer learning is really powerful. And throughout my career, we've used it at every company that I've been at, more informally, but now it's becoming something that people realize is really impactful. So if you teach others what you know, it really helps you learn things better as well. And then you can get feedback, and it's a great way to learn. So one of the things that we do at Degreed, and a lot of other learning platforms do this too, is give experts this opportunity to curate content for a topic where you're an expert on. So that's one of the ways a lot of our customers of Degreed actually help establish peer-to-peer learning by people saying, I'm an expert in JavaScript, for example, and I'm going to curate a content pathway so that others that want to learn JavaScript can learn from me. So that's kind of great. And then lastly, I think that looking for opportunities to apply your skills is a really important thing. I mean, no matter where you are, I used to sit on the board of the Taproot Foundation, which is a pro bono group that helps you volunteer your skills to companies. And according to research done by LinkedIn, those volunteer opportunities actually counted just as much as real job experiences on your LinkedIn profile or on your resume. So even as you're thinking about moving from university to the world of work, realize that opportunities to apply your skills, even in volunteer situations, can be really useful and can help you gain skills. The last thing I wanted to say about this, just a tip, is that I've been really fortunate in my career to work for companies that invest in employee learning. It's not always the case. And I think more and more companies are realizing that it's a huge competitive advantage if they talk about how they invest in employee learning. I know at LinkedIn, I know at Degreed, even at, like I said, most of my companies have had these great company cultures. So when you're looking for companies that you want to work for, think about and ask them, how are they investing in employee learning, and make sure that you get an employer that is actually interested in helping you learn and grow and develop in your career. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with this last poll question, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. But maybe you can think about, based on everything that we've talked about today, what's one thing you'll do? So one, maybe have a different view of the future of, excuse me, your future career. Maybe identify a future skill you may need to focus on. Maybe you'll set a learning goal or schedule time for learning on your calendar, which is kind of funny because you guys are probably always learning given you're at university. But would love to hear your thoughts about what you might take away from this talk, and then I'll open it up. Okay, so results. So it looks like the majority of you will identify a future skill you may need, which I think is a great idea. So with that, I am going to stop sharing and just mention, I'm really happy if you want to see what I'm learning and the skills that I'm building, you can follow me on kelly@degree.com, and please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn because I'm on there every day. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing.
Kelly, thank you so much. I'm always amazed how you can get so much information in such a period of time. It seems to be a very New York skill, but I'm not sure, but it's not necessarily. I know William has a question, but I have a question beforehand. We've had so many entrepreneurs this semester coming and talking, or people thinking about starting up new ventures, and that's part of the theme of this class. You told me a story earlier about, I'm just curious, when somebody is starting a new venture, are they even thinking about people, developing people? What should we be looking for if maybe somebody's looking to go to a new venture in terms of development? Should that be an expectation? Career path development?
Yeah, I think it's becoming so much more important, culture and people development. So when I was at LinkedIn, that was part of our value proposition. We were 2,000 people when I started at LinkedIn and over 11,000 when I left. But part of our value proposition is that we want you to come and work for LinkedIn, whether it be a year or 10 years. We're going to help you develop your career while you're at LinkedIn. So that was kind of how we felt about it. And now, and then we actually, part of my role in innovating was saying, okay, well, let's build a platform to help people learn and build skills. And it was a precursor to what we're actually doing at Degreed now, which is pretty cool. And then I would say now I work for Firework Ventures, and I'm also advising for a few other startups. But with Firework Ventures, I'm actually helping some of their startup CEOs think about the kind of culture that they want to build right from the beginning, and how they want to help people learn and build skills and develop, because really it's a competitive advantage. And the war for talent, especially now with remote work, you can get talent from anywhere. So you have to differentiate yourself, and it helps you stay competitive. So even a startup like this one startup I'm advising for is a virtual reality learning company, and they've only got 40 employees, but I'll tell you, they're focused on developing their employees.
And I thought it was interesting. You mentioned two kind of career paths that were similar to what you had at Sun Microsystems.
Oh.
Do you mind just?
Yeah, I will talk about that, because that's another thing that I advise the CEO about, because one of the things that we're finding is that at Sun Microsystems, we had this great dual career path model where if you wanted to progress in your career, you could stay on a technical track, or you could go onto a manager or leader track. And at a certain point, you could decide. So when you hit a director level, if you didn't want to manage people, you could become a distinguished engineer. You could go on the tech track. Or if you didn't want to be a VP leading a whole organization, but you wanted to be a leader in the technology field, you could become a VP fellow. Of course, those both are hard to attain in that world, but the fact that we had both of those tracks was really attractive, because becoming a manager and a leader in a big company is a completely different skill set than being an expert in your field. And a lot of times people don't realize that, that managing people all day and thinking about their careers and their projects is very different from being a data scientist or being an instructional designer, or whatever your area of expertise is. So I think we're going to see, and so at LinkedIn and at Yahoo and even at Degreed, you'll see a lot of people being star employees who get promoted to manager because there's not that dual career track. And then they realize, I don't really want to be a manager. I want to do this technical work, but I want to progress in my career. So it's an interesting dilemma I think we see in the world of work right now.
Yeah, thanks. Well, let me shift it over to the students. William, I know you have a question. So yeah, William, I'll spotlight you.
All right. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Vicky. Thank you for being here. Really great talk. And I'm a chemistry student, third junior year, and I recently realized that people skills are really important. And a lot of students I've met, they're missing it. And it's so fun. So yeah. Anyways, my question is, in life, with regards to individual growth and development, it seems that the structure we have created discourage individuals from trying new things, leading to more of the follow the outline situations. Think about like getting a degree, getting a jobs. And then my question is, how do we encourage individuals to try something new, take risks and be more quote unquote creative? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a huge shift that's happening in the industry right now, because things are shifting so fast. I do think that there have been in the past. You're right. This idea that you would stay on a career path and kind of stay within the lines. But as you'll notice with the companies that I've talked about being at, they actually were encouraging shifting to completely new areas, and saying that that's going to be good for the company, not only, and it's going to be good for your career, but also it's going to be good for the company. So I think that there still are a lot of companies out there that are more rigid in their thinking about career paths and helping people explore new things. But I think it's changing, and there's a lot of companies out there that want people to be innovative and try new things, and that want to give people new opportunities. So I guess my advice would be is to push for it, when you get into your workplace, and when you're considering employers you want to work for, ask about that. Where are my opportunities to innovate and try new things, and see how they react. That will tell you what their culture is all about. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, William. Erica, I know you have a question. Shall I?
Yeah. Yes. Hi. Sorry. May I talk?
Of course. I'm trying to put you in the spotlight, but I can't at the moment.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well, then I'll go ahead. Hi, my name is Erica, and thank you so much for your talk. I really learned so much, and it's actually kind of funny. Yesterday, I gave a presentation on LinkedIn, and specifically LinkedIn Learning. So
wow.
Anyway, yeah.
That's great.
Kind of funny, yeah. So my question today, and I think my classmate who just spoke kind of touched on that too. What happens in the future if we have bosses or managers, who don't believe in that kind of workplace culture and environment? It could be that the company itself talks about, yes, we have those values for our employees, but, the bosses don't. And then it happens where you can't speak against them, right? Because they have the power to fire you. So yeah, how would we as like workers address that or do about that?
Right. No, I think it's a great question. And, one of the thing, again, it goes back to culture and philosophy. And this is why culture is so important, and why, as a potential employee of a company, you want to learn about their culture, a company's culture before you go there. And so one of the things that we see, I'll give you the example of LinkedIn. We used to run, and this was part of my organization, employee engagement surveys every quarter. And one of the questions we asked on the survey was, and this is to employees, asking them, when was the last time you had a career conversation with your boss? And another question was, do you feel like you're getting what you need in terms of developing and getting the skills you need for the future? If the way we managed it was as if managers got low scores in either of those areas, like it was open to everyone and to the head of that company, and they would be. I don't want to say, they would be focused on for that, because that was against our culture. It meant that you should be having career conversations. If you're not, you've got to get that score up. So basically, employees were able to say if managers weren't supporting their employees. And this is what I was mentioning earlier. When we did that study with Harvard Business Publishing, we said, managers play a key role. How do you hold managers accountable for not just delivering on products, but also for developing their employees? And this was the way we did it, by saying, this is part of our culture, and we're going to ask employees whether or not you as a manager are doing that. So that's one example of one company and how they're doing it. That's how I'm advising CEOs of startups to think about how they do things. But there's a lot of companies that are kind of set in their ways and maybe don't value that as much. And so that's where it becomes more up to you to decide, where, is that the kind of company that's going to fit with what you want? If you have that opportunity, and a lot of you will have that opportunity to choose.
That's
Okay.
great. Erica,
Thank
thanks
you.
for the question.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much.
Rishi, I think, has a question.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Kelly. So I guess from a lot of talks, we've always heard from founders that, the best time to start a startup is like right now, we're in college. But I'd love to hear a bit more on your thoughts, like getting operating experience, or at least like working at a startup. And then after that, like how that, like, you use those skills and use those learnings and actually being an advisor and being an investor now.
Yeah, so with my career, it's really interesting because I hadn't really looked at it this way until later on. But I started, the biggest company I worked for was Sun, right? And then I kept going to smaller companies. So Sun was around 40,000 employees. Then I went to Yahoo, was like 14,000 employees. And then I went to LinkedIn, 2,000 employees. I went to Degreed, under 100 employees. And I actually think that now, as I'm advising CEOs at startups, it's interesting because so much of what I learned about how companies work and how they operate was from my days at Sun Microsystems, a more mature, not a really huge company, but a pretty big company that I felt had a lot of basics in place in terms of processes and tools and good leadership to model and things like that. Whereas startup founders who don't have any of that experience, they're kind of starting blind. Like they don't really even get how to structure a company if they haven't been in a more mature company. So I really like the idea of maybe seeing how a well-run company works, getting in that, and then jumping into a startup. I remember also thinking, for people whose first job was LinkedIn, thinking, oh my God, they have no idea what the real world is like. Not all companies are like LinkedIn. It was such a different environment, being very innovative and very, I don't know, kind of different from a big company atmosphere that a lot of people cut their teeth on. So maybe a medium-sized company is a good place to start, to see. But it's hard to start a company when you don't have any context for how things work. in terms of operating model.
I'm going to follow up on that. I don't know if you can hear it. I'm sorry. I've got squeaky toy going in the background. It's not me. But so you're talking about LinkedIn and the culture there. I am curious, how did you, I mean, we all hear about Reid Hoffman and he's a big personality, big person, but what made you want to go to LinkedIn?
So very interesting is that, Reid Hoffman is the founder. He had an office at LinkedIn, but the reason I really wanted to go to LinkedIn was they actually recruited me while I was so LinkedIn's whole business model is passive recruiting. We're going to go after people who already have a job, right? So I was at Yahoo. They came and recruited me, and at first I was like, oh, that's not. So here's another tip, just for people that are getting a lot of calls. I always, even if I'm really happy in a role, I always talk to recruiters because I want to know what's out there. It's always a good way to check your market value. Anyway, it was after talking to a few people at LinkedIn and understanding the opportunity that I was going to get to start a learning organization from the ground up and to be involved in really shaping and working with Jeff Weiner, the CEO, on helping drive learning and the culture, that sold me. I mean, I really wanted to be part of that. And it was like being at a startup within a startup. One of the questions that Jeff asked me when he interviewed me was, you've been at Sun for a long time, and Sun is a pretty big company compared to LinkedIn. How do you think that will work? Because a lot of smaller companies worry that people from bigger companies will bring a lot of bureaucracy and rules. And one of the things I said was, basically within Sun, we had our own little innovation centers and own little groups, and that's what we did. And like, you can build a startup culture within a bigger company. And I think that that's really important to note too, because a lot of people that came to LinkedIn from big companies with a big company mentality that they were going to have all the processes and the tools already figured out didn't fit well with LinkedIn. So if you, or it degreed for that matter. So I think that, being able to, knowing that you're going to be able to innovate and, create products, that's really exciting. But also knowing that when you go to a smaller company, it's going to be a lot more scrappy than a more well-established company. And if that doesn't work for you, then it's probably not a good fit. For me, I loved it. I wanted to innovate. I wanted to create, and I got an opportunity to actually build products at LinkedIn as well, which was amazing.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Sushi, for the question. Burkhard, you have a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much for the talk. I actually really enjoyed the part about how currency is basically skills, and skills are currency in a sense, right? And that very gamifies my mentality towards it. So that's a really good way to do that. But how we gain those skills as far as, like, say, a learning environment, I really enjoy explaining skills to other people, and I also really enjoy learning skills. But I've been in like an interview before where it's like, hey, we really appreciate if you learn it yourself type thing. Like, you do it on your own. And I'm wondering, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? Is there a time for that? And additionally, how do we create environments so that we can learn together?
Yeah, that's, I'd say that it really depends on the environment and what you're wanting to learn. So I firmly believe, my philosophy is, and what I've been kind of out, my job right now at Degreed is less about internal operational things, but kind of evangelizing the future of work and learning and how people should be thinking about learning in the workplace. And I firmly believe that this old model of separating, you go to a class over here and then you hope that you learn some skills and you can bring it back to the job. That's an old model. The new model is about work becomes learning, right? So imagine, like, I created a product at LinkedIn where we actually, made work or learning part of the work. You take intact product teams, right? And you work with the whole team on learning new skills. Or anybody who's in engineering and is learning about agile development, learning that as a team as you work, as you're working on real projects and real work. So ultimately, the vision is the workplace becomes a learning place, and you don't separate the two. So this idea, go learn stuff on your own. I'll give you an example where that makes sense. I'm learning Italian, and that's for me. I want to go live in Italy, and I want to be fluent in Italian. And so if somebody says, great, go learn that on your own, I can understand that. That's probably my own passion, and that seems okay to me. But if you want to learn data science and it's part of your job, I mean, then ask for a project. What I always say is ask for opportunities, look for opportunities. You don't know data science and you're trying to learn it. Can you ask for, what is there a project where I can actually apply these skills so I can actually learn on a real project on the job? That's getting closer to learning being part of work. But ultimately, if everybody's always learning at work and that's how we have it go, that's utopia in my mind.
Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Burkhard. I think the next question is Kenza's.
Hello, I just wanted to say firstly, thank you so much for such an insightful presentation. I feel that I definitely learned a lot. My question for you today is firstly, how do you think this shift of like the new types of learning ways and methods in the workplace will be transitioned into like established companies and new startups smoothly and effectively?
Yeah, I think, that's what we're seeing happen today. I mean, I mentioned our funding for Degree today. And if you look at all the other education startups, HR, tech startups, companies are realizing that this is an imperative. So, we have about Degreed itself has like a third of the Fortune 50 companies using Degreed. So, whether it be Cisco or Nike or McKinsey. We talk about a lot of the big Fortune 500 companies. They're using us, and most companies are realizing they need to move to that paradigm. So I would say if they're not there yet, you're going to see this very quick. Everybody's trying to figure out how they get into this, what technology they're going to use. And it's just, I don't think it's a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. Right. So when I started Degreed 5 years ago, people were like, they didn't really, that's how much work has changed in the past 5 years that people who didn't even know what we were talking about 5 years are realizing, wow, this is like an imperative. Unilever, Bank of America, these are some of our bigger customers. I could go on and on about like well-established companies that are realizing this is like the future of work. We have to do it. So I think that's all good news for all of you.
So it's coming up very soon, basically.
Yes. Yes. I mean, with startups, I think it's a little different because, there is, I think it's more individual, personalized. Technology helps when you're trying to do things at scale, and startups don't quite have scale. So but it's like there's studies that come out that once you get past 150 people, you need to start doing things. But like, startups that are, under that, it's harder to leverage technology, but they don't need it as much, right? Because they're so small. So, but I think you'll see a lot of change even in this next year coming up. And the pandemic was something else I think that really helped organizations realize, like before, the percentage of companies that were allowing their employees to work remotely was really small. And now I think most of you are probably aware that most companies are going to have some sort of hybrid model, if not a complete remote work model. And that just encourages, again, technology for learning, in the workplace. And so that's, I think, the other thing that's making it just so much more prevalent.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Thanks. I think Anton is next. And then we have one more, which I think is a very interesting question also. So Anton, please.
Thank you. Let me know if you can hear me well. I've been having trouble with my mic.
I can hear you.
Kelly, so I've heard actually quite a bit about Sun. Sun is sort of this iconic company. I have some friends who are Silicon Valley old timers. They always talk about how great Sun was, how everyone wanted to work at Sun. I understand kind of like the Google of its time, maybe more sort of important as it relates to people just wanting to work there. That was a great company for employees. And I was wondering, who would you view, except LinkedIn, of course, to be the Sun of today? Who does it best, in your opinion, at the moment? Is there someone a company that we should all aspire to work for, really?
Yeah, I mean, I know that Eric Schmidt talked to all of you before. We were at Sun at the same time, and you know, there was something about Sun that I even now, I've had experiences at a lot of companies now, and I work with a lot of companies. And there was something about Sun in terms of its culture, in terms of it was before its time. 50%, when I was at Sun, 50% of employees were allowed to work remotely. And that was a long time ago, like before people even considered remote work. They knew how to make great leaders. Culture was a huge part of what Sun was all about. They had it all. And I changed my career 3 times in the same company. So that shows you how much they valued, to the earlier question about, how do we get new opportunities? How do we learn new skills? I mean, that's why you hear so much about Sun Microsystems, because it was that company that kind of had it all. Today, it's such a great question that you ask. Interestingly enough, out of all the companies that I've worked for, and you may be surprised to hear this because it's not a tech company, the most forward-thinking company in terms of that I've seen is Unilever. And would you believe that? I mean, I don't know, but they are just they were one of our first partners, and they have all the components that I just mentioned that Sun had. They're not a tech company, but I think they have all those ingredients. If I were to say one that just comes to mind as being amazing that way.
Terrific, thank you. And since you touched very, very briefly about remote work, I was curious to hear, sorry for the double question, how likely it is for this to finally stick? Because we know that Yahoo and Google were all trying this about a decade ago, and then 5 years ago, and it didn't stick the previous 2 times, and now it finally seems like it's here to stay. And I'm sorry.
So I was actually, I left Yahoo right as Marissa Mayer was coming on board as the CEO. And for those of you who don't know, and I actually wrote about this in the book, The Expertise Economy, that whole thing with Yahoo and remote work, I thought was a fiasco, because remote work was working fine. And when Marissa Mayer came in, some people said, oh, some people are taking advantage of the remote work situation. And so she put a halt to it, while at the same time she built a nursery next door because she just had her first baby. So you weren't allowed to stay at home and do that, but she was able to have her baby at work, which I thought was not very great. Having said all of that, so I don't think that, remote work, there are some managers who feel like unless they see people working, that they're not working. And I think that here's where you guys all have the power of making that a reality. Now, with so many people and so many companies realizing that it can be very productive to be working remotely. Some people will never go back to the office. Like, they will never work for an employer who doesn't allow that flexibility. I think it was Microsoft who said their work at home policy is to be as flexible as possible, right? Because they don't want to put rules in place. They want, kind of a hybrid workforce. So I think it's here to stick. And I think that the reason it's going to stick is that companies won't be able to keep great talent. And in fact, Yahoo lost a whole lot of amazing talent when they cut off that remote working policy. So I think remote work is here to stay, in that if people want to get great talent, they're going to have to provide flexibility for their employees. That's what I think.
Thanks for the question, Anton, and thanks for that answer, Kelly. I think we're going to round out with Arda's question. Arda, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to put on your video.
Oh, yeah. Can you see me?
Absolutely. And I'll add your pin.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here. I've found the talk to be very interesting. I wanted to ask you about employee fatigue. So in a workplace where like self-learning or learning is highly promoted in general, what is like an optimal way to kind of deal with employee fatigue?
Employee fatigue around learning or around work?
Both, actually.
Okay, that's a great question. I would say, again, I mentioned it earlier in my talk, that I think sometimes people get overwhelmed with how much. I mean, think about it. When people, for example, ask me if I'm done with work today, I will say, yeah, I'm done with work today, but my work never ends, right? I have to be responsible for saying, this is how much I'm going to get done today. And we all, especially with remote work, this is becoming even more true. And with learning, I'd say it's the same thing, that you can overwhelm yourself with so much learning that it becomes fatiguing to people. So I always say, try to put some boundaries around it. And with learning in particular, try to be really intentional about what you're going to be learning and what you're going to be focusing on. And same thing with your work deliverables. I think the future of work is not about how many hours you're sitting at your desk a day, but what you're actually, the quality of the work that you're delivering. And that's the business case that I make for how people should be managed. Nobody likes a micromanager. Nobody wants, that's why remote work can be fine, as long as managers are accountable to helping their people understand what are they responsible for, and helping them set goals for learning that aren't overwhelming to people. So I always say, focus on one thing you want to learn, and then try to incorporate learning into your work and make things manageable. Because at Degreed, our culture has a particular statement in our culture deck that talks about working orange. And what that means is if you're working red, meaning you're working constantly, you're not going to be effective and successful. But you have to be pushing yourself and challenging yourself. And so yellow means you're not working, to your potential. So staying in that orange, burning bright orange kind of thing, and realizing if you're getting in the red that you're going to have to pull back a bit and just balance, what you're doing at work, so you don't burn out, because burnout is a real thing and it happens to people if you don't manage it. Thanks for the question. It's a really good one.
Thank you for answering.
Thank you.
Kelly, thank you so much for your time. Normally at this time, Annie has raised her hand, but normally at this time we post also a survey link for everybody to give you feedback for this great time. And so I'm going to ask Pranati if she wouldn't mind posting that, because I'm having some issues again with my presentation. Pranati, are you okay doing that?
Yes, 1 second.
You can also say it verbally. Woo.
And in the meantime, I would like to mention that if you did have a question that you didn't get a chance to ask, feel free to, link with me on LinkedIn, and we can be connected, and you can ask me your question that way.
Fantastic. Pranati, I think that the password has something to do with economy.
Yeah, I'm just checking it just to make sure that I'm going to say / type the right thing.
And thank you all so much. Kelly, it's just amazing how much information you have. And I do hope, I'll be curious to know how many people do link in with you, because, and a tip on LinkedIn, maybe you have this tip as well. I really don't link in that much with people if I don't know them, but I definitely don't link with them if they don't write a reason why they want to link with me. So just a little tip, it'd be nice to hear that. And in terms of the passcode, Pranati, thanks for being on top of that. It is Economy Build, ECONOMY, Build, the capital BUILD.
Both E and B are capital.
Thank you. E and B in capital. And my apologies, I'm just having some issues, but we'll keep that up for a while. And I just want to thank you for being with us, Kelly. It's always great. And thank you. And it's exciting to see what Degreed is doing. I think I said, congratulations on your 1 point something billion in funding. And then I was like, well, billion in funding would be nice, but valuation is good too.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And thank you for inviting me today. It's really my pleasure to talk with all of you, our future leaders in the workforce, and wish all of you the best of success in your college career. It's a great time. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you. And Pranati, I'm going to ask you a favor as a one-off because I had some issues with my posting. Would you actually give the passcode Economy Build via an announcement on B courses to everybody just so that they can provide feedback?
Yes, I will do that right now.
That would be great. I wish you all a good night. Have a good night in Denver, a good night in Chicago, a good night in Berkeley. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Go Bears.
Go Bears. We'll see you next week with the Cal Bear with Prakash, CTO and co-founder of Nextdoor.
Thank you.
Take care and good night. I'm going to stay on in case anybody has questions. Pranati, I'm assuming the quiz is live.
So you cut off the quizzes?
Is live?
Yes, it should be. It opens at 6 p.m.
All right. Everybody have a good night. Rishi, thank you. Pranati, thank you. It says only registered enrolled students can take it. That is correct. Only registered and enrolled students can take that quiz because it is also our way of doing feedback, doing attendance. If you want to provide feedback, you are welcome to send it to me, vhowell, Howell, at berkeley.edu, and I'm happy to pass that on to our speaker.
Yeah, but I think Yijun, apologies if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, but she says like you're actually an enrolled student. So just like take a screenshot of like the message you're seeing on B courses, and then feel free to CC me on the email. And hopefully we can like figure things out. If not, try doing another browser. It doesn't really always work well on mobile devices. So try log on to like a Mac or a laptop. Doesn't work, then send that like email and screenshot, please.
And for those few students who are still on, there's an opportunity right there if you can come up with the better B courses.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everybody. See you next Tuesday.